The UFC is having one of the most necessary rematches after one of the closest title fights ever, if not the closest. And I'm going to be going over the game plans for each of these guys, how they could win, how they could improve, and how did Dricus Du Plessis win the first fight, if he did win the first fight. So getting into it, how did Dricus win the first fight? So he wasn't really able to get much control time or land any significant damage with his takedowns, and he would always end the round, usually with securing a takedown to try to get the judge's nod for that round. And it worked out, and his grappling, in my opinion, is what won him that fight. It was a genius move because I feel like a lot of the times judges score a fight based on who wins the last few minutes instead of the first few minutes, which we've seen many times before. And he would always, especially in the first round and second round, he would start off very, very slow. And outside of rounds 1 and 5, almost every round had Strickland just barely outlanding Dricus. But in close rounds like that, Dricus would just end the round on top with a takedown, or at least get it within the last 30 seconds. So that's the last thing the judges remember. And when you pair this with the fact that Strickland landed pretty much zero significant single strikes, it makes it extremely hard for him to win a decision, like we've seen in the past against Jared Cannonier, against even Paulo Costa. One of the judges gave it to Costa, which is insane. And we saw that against Dricus Du Plessis. And I know Dricus's face was messed up, but that was the overall damage over time, not really from a single strike, which doesn't really count for the judging, because if the damage wasn't really done in that round, the judges aren't really going to score it in his favor. And as for the striking, Dricus, he seemed to take the first round off, and not only to try to figure out Sean Strickland like he said, but I believe it was to conserve energy. Strickland does have the better gas tank of the two, even though Dricus pushes very hard. But we saw Dricus took the first round off kind of, and he even took almost the second round off up until the end. And Dricus, he also was able to not be on the back foot for long periods of time, like an Adesanya, like a Paulo Costa, and that also helped him get the nod. Just going first, even though he wasn't landing super clean a lot of the times, he just was moving forward, and he was giving a good impression to the judges. I think Sean, you could have easily given him the fight, in my opinion. This was, in my opinion, the closest title fight I have ever watched, and I think it comes down to how you score round 2, which on paper, I believe it was only one significant strike to Sean Strickland, or it could have been to Du Plessis. Either way, it was super close. And for the game plans, how can Sean Strickland, who a lot of people say he fights the same in every one of his fights, teeps to the body, jab, that's it, very good defense, how can he improve? Well, first off, he has to stuff the takedowns, similar to how we did in the first fight. Has to get up immediately, has to make sure that Dricus does not get any notable damage off of those positions. And he has to be prepared, especially at the end of the rounds, because that is when Dricus is going to shoot at the last minute, the last 30 seconds, something like that, which may mean he has to kind of widen his stance because he has a very narrow stance. This could mean that, and I could also see if he does kind of, I guess, widen his stance, that maybe Dricus notices, and maybe in the third round, second round, after Strickland is able to stuff the takedowns, he starts landing better calf kicks. I could also see that. And just like how the judges favor Dricus when he was scoring the takedowns, they also favor guys who defend the takedowns, which if he's able to defend the takedown and then land a few shots to end the round, in a close round, they're going to give it to Sean Strickland. I think he also has to go back to the teep he was using at the beginning of the fight in the first round, and I believe in the second, and then he just kind of stopped using it. And I know Dricus didn't seem super active at first, which I know was because he was trying to figure him out. But part of that was he was having trouble advancing because Sean kept on throwing the teep, and Strickland just kind of stopped using it as the fight went on. And I think that Sean knows that realistically he probably can't finish Dricus, if we're being honest, but he does hold a cardio advantage, meaning if he keeps the same output he did in the 5th round, which in the 5th round he completely went for it, went for broke, throwing crazy output, and he was able to beat Dricus just because of his gas tank and because of his output. If he's able to do that from the first round, or at least in the second, third, and fourth, because his output really wasn't there in the second, third, and fourth, to be honest, which he's a guy who usually doesn't have crazy output, but still, if he ups the volume a little bit, it could definitely help, especially early on. And in my opinion, we know that he was able to damage Dricus's eye, just landing the jab over and over again, which means it's his best offensive weapon. The problem is, I feel like if you're not fighting someone like Adesanya, who is very low output in that fight, it's difficult to win a 5-round decision just with a jab. And he came close. He came super close. Arguably should have gotten it. But I think he's going to have to change it a little bit, and I think he's going to need to throw more combinations, which, yes, that's going to mean he's more defensively open, but I think overall it gives him a better chance at winning, in my opinion. And yeah, I get his defense also is really good, so I don't think it's going to open him up too much. And I do believe he is being overlooked in this fight. I do think maybe his defense may need some changing. He does have a few holes. And we saw kind of Adesanya, who has similar holes in his defensive game, get exposed against Nasruddin Imavov, which I predicted to happen if you don't know. And basically, a lot of the times when he's being blitzed, when people are throwing big shots at him, he likes to back up with his chin kind of in the air and he leaves it open. Adesanya had this problem before. I think Buckley was even talking about it. And with Imavov, he's so good with his straight shots and he's so fast that he was able to capitalize off of this mistake. And I think Dricus, he's not super fast, but with his power, I think he'll be able to potentially capitalize off of this mistake. Sean Strickland does have a good chin though. Adesanya also had a good chin at one point, so we'll see. Moving on to Dricus Du Plessis, his game plan, in my opinion. Dricus, I feel like his grappling looked much improved against Adesanya, who also has great takedown defense. And I think Dricus should kind of be shooting more in the center, similar to how he was against Adesanya, because just like Izzy, Sean is elite at getting back up. And when his back is against the cage, he could easily walk up, he could easily get up to his feet, and it's very hard to keep him down. Now, some advantages Dricus has is his physicality and his size. Easily way more the physical of the two. However, I don't think that he should use it so much to the point where he's kind of just forcing the takedown so much that he's just pushing Strickland against the fence, which is a much easier position for him to get up in. I do still believe Dricus has super underrated fight IQ, in my opinion. Adesanya, he made the mistake of throwing kicks mainly to the head and the legs of Strickland, which are areas where Sean is super defensively responsible, but Sean isn't as responsible when it comes to his body. Dricus was landing some of his hardest shots with body kicks, with combinations to the body. And these, especially, they wouldn't land flush every single time, but it's something that he needs to continue to do. Even the head kicks weren't landing flush every single time, but it just gave that image and it was pushing Strickland back no matter what. But I do believe he needs to target the body to open up the head, in my opinion. And I think as the fight goes on, he should use the lead. His lead leg kick is really good. And I think he should use it to the head and straight shots upstairs eventually after he goes to the body in the first few rounds. And I think that that could put Sean away potentially. I think that that's the biggest threat Sean Strickland has to getting finished, in my opinion, especially if Dricus already has installed a takedown threat. And I think instead of continuing to throw like looping shots, big hooks, whatever, which honestly I don't even mind that because it does push Sean Strickland back. Even if he wasn't landing it clean, even if he wasn't really hurting Strickland, Sean isn't really a great counter striker, especially when you blitz him, so he doesn't really have to respect the power coming back either. But regardless, I do think he needs to throw more straight shots down the middle. We saw when Dricus was able to cut Sean Strickland in the fourth round with I think that was one of the biggest punches of the fight, if I'm not mistaken. That was a more straight, I believe, right hand, I believe. And it wasn't like a big looping shot. It was just kind of down the middle, and it cut him really bad. And again, we've seen a similar hole with Adesanya be exposed with a Mavov. And with Dricus's power, I do think he could land that shot. Will he? I don't know, but it definitely is possible. And I also feel like long combinations would also help in this scenario because Strickland is so good at avoiding the first couple punches that you throw at him. But when you keep on throwing, not like a Francis Ngannou like Rosenstrike knockout, but something along those lines where he extends the combination where Sean eventually kind of lets his guard down and then he gets clipped when he's not expecting it. I would also like to see stuff like that where he doesn't just blitz in with one or two punches. He lands, he tries to go for 3, 4, 5, something like that. And maybe he ends it going for a takedown if they clinch. But I don't think it's likely that he finds the submission. I know some people are saying him by, 50-45 by him grappling, him by first round sub, like he did against Izzy in the 4th round, but Izzy, he just made a rookie mistake that I just highly doubt Strickland makes. However, kind of like the first fight, control time can definitely win him the fight, especially if he does somehow get the back and he's able to take it for the round. I mean, that's not a ton of energy used, and it's a clear round for Dricus if he's able to do that. Dricus, I don't think he could go into this fight thinking that he has everything figured out because with just a few tweaks, Sean could easily win this fight, and he arguably won it last time. And he also has to make sure he doesn't use all of his gas tank too soon. I get he trusts his gas tank, he has crazy output in every fight, but still, he can't come out guns blazing in the first. I mean, I guess he could, but if he doesn't get the finish, it's going to be a really rough night for him, in my opinion. Now, who do I think wins? My final prediction. Well, I think that we are either going to get, 3 options. A competitive decision on either side, just like the first fight, or Dricus later rounds TKO, specifically the 3rd or 4th round. This is still a coin flip fight. I've been confident in my past picks, and I've gotten them way wrong, even though I think Adesanya and Umar were good picks regardless, and I picked them 48-47, but still, this is a coin flip fight, and I'm not too sure on this one. I think that Sean may try to be a little bit more active, and I think Dricus may start a little bit faster than he did before. And I think that Dricus, it'll cause him to have more success in the earlier rounds and lead to Sean having more success in the later rounds if he doesn't get finished, compared to the first fight where it was Sean having success in the earlier rounds and Dricus having success in the later rounds, which is crazy because no one would have thought that would have happened. Everyone would have thought that would have been the opposite way, whatever. And I think that Dricus will also up the activity in terms of grappling. I think more attempts, more effort for control time instead of just getting a takedown just for the sake of it. And I do think that he'll have more success with control time, but it may cause him to use more of his gas tank, which could be an issue for him if he doesn't get the submission. He could even, I think, land the KO shot with kind of feigning the takedown and then landing a big shot, which he was able to do in the first fight. It didn't hurt Strickland, but still, something like that, if he has a bigger takedown threat this time, I could see that happening. And I think a big part of it is, does Dricus have enough gas to do this for 4 rounds? Assuming one of the earlier rounds Sean is able to get, does he have enough to do this for 4 rounds? He's shown in the past that he could push a crazy pace, but honestly, for this fight, I think it comes down to how well did his camp go. And I know you could say that for every fight, but seriously, if he has major injuries or something like that, or the camp didn't go well, he has staph infection, I am not confident in him to win this fight, in my opinion. But if he came into this camp even better than the first fight, no injuries, no major injuries, and his camp went relatively well, I do trust his gas tank. I do. For 5 rounds, I trust him enough to get 3 of those rounds. Now, again, if he doesn't, I think Sean Strickland will take it by a close decision. Even if Dricus isn't healthy, I think that he could still make it super close. And I don't think Strickland finishes him on the ground or on the feet. And at the end of the day, I am going to trust Dricus Du Plessis to implement a better game plan compared to Sean, who does mostly fight the same. Even though, he has a good coach, he could definitely switch a few things up to win the fight. I do trust Dricus, who has a really good team around him. I wouldn't recommend betting on this fight. Maybe you could pick, I don't know, Strickland, because he's kind of I think a 2-1 underdog, which I don't agree with. I definitely don't agree with the odds. I don't think that Dricus should be a 2-1 favorite. We could also see another quote unquote robbery, even though the first fight wasn't a robbery, where Sean wins a close decision, but Dricus is the one most people think should have gotten the nod, just like in the first fight. But yeah, I am going to go with Dricus. I'm tempted to pick him by a third round TKO or a fourth round TKO, but I'm going to pick him by another close decision, in my opinion. Again, maybe I get this pick wrong too, and I just can't predict fights, but I think either guy could take it, in my opinion. But yeah, let me know who you guys think is going to win this one. If you're going with Strickland, if you're going with Du Plessis, and if you're going with Du Plessis, how is he going to win? Decision, finish, something like that. What round? But yeah, that is it for me.